No doubt we're living through, I think, truly historic times. It's like snowballing and exponentially growing faster and faster. The news, like it used to be every week a new development, and then every day, and the last few days it's been like every couple of hours a new development. It's like really revolutionizing the balance of power in the world, definitely in the Middle East, and it's kind of staggering, and please God, it's all going in the right direction. Very relevant to what we read in the parasha this week, which is how we deal with exile. Let me preface this. There is a statement that is made by Ramban, and Ramban is actually talking about the life of Abraham. And I'll get you the quote in a moment. The quote reads, Maseh avot siman labanim. The deeds of the fathers, the avot, is a sign for the sons, for the children. In other words, the way our forefathers acted somehow, the opposite of a commemoration, when we do something to remember what happened, they kind of pre pre-memorated, can you say that? They paved a path for us and a road for us to follow, and they did certain actions. And I'll give you an example, because that's the first time that this phrase comes up is there, with Rambam saying the following. The principle, says Ramban, by which we understand all the coming portions of scripture, concerning Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. And that is, whatever happened to the patriarchs is a sign to the children. So, for this reason, the verses narrate at great length the account of the journeys of the patriarchs, digging of the wells, other events. Some may consider this unnecessary, of no useful purpose. In truth, this also was a lesson for the future. When an event happens to any one of the three patriarchs, that is decreed to happen to his children can be understood. And Ramban follows the following pattern. He says, developing the story of Abraham in Egypt. So Abraham is going to Egypt. Why? Because of a famine. There's no food. So he goes to Egypt. And what happens while he's in Egypt? Well, some of his family is taken captive, and treated very badly while in captivity. Then Abraham prays, and the Pharaoh and the Egyptians are struck with plagues, illness, and eventually Sarah is freed, and at that point Pharaoh gives her many gifts in compensation for the treatment. That's kind of 400 years ahead of what happened when Yaakov went to Egypt with his children as necessity, food, a famine in the Holy Land. He goes there, and after a while, the Jews are very badly treated, and they kidnapped, so to speak, taken as slaves. And then the end is that they do come out of captivity with great wealth. So that experience of Abram, which is obviously far more concentrated, is actually setting the tone for the things that would happen to us as a nation hundreds of years later. Now we come to our parsha. And our parsha, and it could be an example, I'm just giving you one brief one so we understand the principle. Our parsha is dealing with Yaakov facing Esav. And what do they each represent? Esav he has another name, Edom, and Edom, that's Rome. So the Roman exile, which is the current one. We haven't had another exile since the Romans destroyed the temple, the second temple. We've lived in a state of exile. So even though we've been under the control of various nations, we still refer to this as Galut Edom. And it is mentioned that eventually Galut Edom will morph into Galut Yishmael, which we know very well what that represents. So Edom would be more Western culture, Roman culture. Yishmael, no need to spell that out. We know exactly what that stands for. And it's probably in that realm that there's most of the upheaval. But because we still considered in this Galut, this exile of Rome, we're going to turn to the story of Yaakov facing Esav and how he deals with that threat. And that's going to be a siman, a sign for us to understand how to actually handle this all. So there is Esav coming towards Yaakov. Yaakov has effectively gotten rid of the Lavan threat. He survived that. It was a 20-year journey from the time he arrived there, working 14 years, 7 years for Leah, and sorry, 7 years for Rachel, and then 7 years for Rachel again, because it turned out the first 7 years were Leah, and then he remains there for another 6 years. Until the family has been established and 11 of his 12 sons are born. And at that point he says, I'm going, and Hashem gives his blessings, and his wives give their blessings, and they take off. End of last week's parasha, Lavan tries to chase them. Anyway, they made some kind of a truce. Now he is in Israel. And he has to somehow get over the threat of Esav. Esav, who's been harboring this 20 years, and according to tradition, he was also for 14 years in the house of Shem and Eva, in hiding, studying. So that would have been 34-year faribel. Can family faribels last that long? I never thought so, but based on the experience in the rabbinate of now 40 years, so I know that faribels can last that long. Sometimes even carry on to the next generation, and eventually the children don't even know why their parents fought, but they know that their side was right, inevitably. So yeah, it's a very, very long hatred, and it seems to be unabated, because when Yaakov sends messengers out to try and reach out to Esav in peace, then the messengers come back and said, the words are Banu lachicha el Esav. We went to the one who you thought was your brother, but is actually still Esav, and there's a lot of upset and anger there. And if we read carefully through that passage, we'll find some hints as to how we actually deal with this Galut Edom, with this Roman exile. So when he's going to confront Esav, it says that he prepares. And Rashi summarizes as follows. He prepared himself for three things. The one is the gift, which we read in detail. He just summarized it. So the present passed before him. So that was an elaborate gift. And the way Yaakov presented it was that he sent messages with various gift of cattle and other animals, and he put space in between so that they would come, in waves and overwhelm him. For somebody who loves material possessions, it's very hard to resist wearing him down. That's one way, is to placate sort of the enemy. But then he also prayed, as it states that in verse 10, he said, God of my father Abraham, and at the same time, the third preparation is for war. And he says, in this verse, because Rashi is on that verse here, so he doesn't quote the number, I'm sorry. He says, the remaining camp may escape. So he divides his camp into two parts, and he says, we're going to fight, and hopefully one camp can run away. Of course, Rashi is quoting this from Medrash Tanchuma Yashan, the old Medrash Tanchuma, and he gives us a reference over here. So from the first lesson we're going to learn here is that the approach has to be three-pronged. We put our faith in God, and we pray. At the same time, we know that we may have to fight this battle physically, and at the same time, we're also going to try every way possible to resolve this on a peaceful basis, and that's our approach to Esav. And having gone through all this, he then proceeds to cross the river that separates him from where Esav is in his camp is. It's a Yabok, river, and he passes, he crosses over that. It's then that he has this interesting encounter. So the family's on the one side of the river, and he goes back because he had to collect some belongings that he'd left behind, and he remains alone on the one side of the river. And there's this figure wrestling with him, this man wrestling with him until the break of dawn, which commentaries say that's the the angel of Esav, the incarnation of Esav in an angelic form. It's kind of the representative of Esav up above. I lost you there. There we go. It's a representation of Esav, as it happens, up above in the celestial realms, and Yaakov is battling with him. He's battling with him until dawn. And this is symbolic of the battle with Esav that we have, but until dawn. It's right through the night, but then there's going to be a dawn. And that fight is going to continue throughout the ages, and it's a mean fight, because although the angel is going to be unable to kill Yaakov, to really destroy him, he's going to hurt him. He's going to hurt him, and this is, a destiny. They're going to be enemies in this exile situation who are going to try to destroy us. They're not going to be able to. They will maim us. They will hurt us. They will try to hurt us badly. They will definitely cause damage, but lo yachol lo, not be able to overcome him. And this is going to go on right through the night until dawn. Come morning, the angel says, "You got to let me go," and Yaakov says, "No, I want a blessing." And really, when Yaakov says, "I want a blessing," he's saying, "I'd like you to acknowledge that the brachot, the blessings that were given to me, belong to me. I'd like Esav's camp to admit." That the blessings were not stolen, but really belonged to me. Of course, this has got to do with the purchase of the birthright. And he begs the angel. And the angel then says to him, "Okay, this is what's going to happen. Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. Not Yaakov, but Israel." And he gives them a reason. Israel is about ruling. Sar is a prince. Sar, name of Hashem. So you will rule. Sarita, you will rule. And this is actually not the official name change. That happens later when Hashem says to Yaakov the same thing. You no longer will have the name Yaakov. You will now be called Israel. But the angel told him this in the course of that fight. Such a powerful lesson to us also about exile and threats, existential threats to us. And what happens? We rise to a higher level. The name Yaakov, that signifies it's a far kind of lower level. Yaakov signifies, Yaakov on the back foot, having to cheat Esav, a cave, the heel that is holding on to, trying to hold Esav down. And also Esav says, "Oh, that name Yaakov has got to do with the fact that he's cheated me twice over." Are his words. But no, he's leaving that Yaakov persona. He's graduating to something far more powerful about control and growth. And this is the Jewish nation in exile, suffering, pain, and hurt, but as a result of that, growing to a high level. And then the Torah tells us Yaakov asks this man, "Tell me your name." And he says, "You may not ask my name, or you mustn't ask my name. Lama zeh tishal shmi? Why would you want to ask my name?" And Rashi comments there and says, "There's no name. Angels don't have specific names because they get sent from above to fulfill a task. And when they are fulfilling, sent on that mission for the particular task, then that name is associated. So every time God sends me to do a mission, I've got a different name. So I can't give you, a proper name to describe me. I'm a messenger of Hashem, and it changes all the time. But it's so significant that he's saying this because he is Galut. He is the enemy of the Jews that is threatening our survival. He is the existential threat. Keeps on changing names. What have we been accused of over the years? Why has there been hatred of the Jews? Because we capitalists, or because we communists? Because we supported apartheid, or because we fought for social justice? because we are too wealthy or too poor, and therefore parasites, or control the banks. None of this makes sense, but that's anti-Semitism. It morphs all the time. The angel says, if you want to understand the world's hatred for the Jew, don't try to put a name on it. Don't try to put a label on it. I don't have a name. I just morph. I just change all the time because the hatred is inherent. It's a core hatred, and it's about Zionism, or it's about the fact that we didn't have a land and we had nowhere to be, and we had to be chased out because we were strangers in another land. So we have our own land, so we hate it for that. So it doesn't really take on a specific a form, and it morphs all the time. And this is the depth of the message of the angel when he says, "You cannot ask me my name because it changes all the time." And then they meet. They meet, and we know this meeting. It's a very powerful meeting. Esav is standing there with his men confronting Yaakov, and Yaakov sends the children ahead, and there he's standing, and eventually they meet and they embrace. And there's a mixed comment about this embrace, whether it was genuine or whether it was not. And the words in Rashi quoted from the Talmud is, it's a definite. It's a definite that Esau hates Yaakov. It's just a question of now how to understand this embrace. Was it genuine because he was overcome with compassion when he saw him in his family, or was it completely fake and not intended? But the bottom line is, we start from the point of departure, that Esav hates Yaakov, and Esav turns to Yaakov and says, "Why did you send me all these gifts?" And Yaakov answers, "Well, I'd like to find grace in your eyes, and this is why I gave you these gifts." And this is how Esav answers him. He says, "Yesh li rav." I have a lot. Okay, enough. But the word rav really means a lot. The difference between a lot and enough is that if you have enough, you don't need more. But if you have lots, there's always room for more. And if you just turn to the next verse, Yaakov will prevail and insist, and Esau will take the gift. But if he had enough, he wouldn't have said that. In fact, when the tables turn, and Esau says, "Can I give you gifts?" Yaakov answers, "Yeshli kol." I have everything I need. But Esau says, "Yeshli rav." I got lots, but there's room for more. There's always room for growth and possessions. Then he uses the words "achi," my brother. Yehi lecha shelach. May that which is yours remain yours. So this is Esau talking to Jacob, making noise. Okay, that worked. Esav is saying to Yaakov, "My brother, let what you have remain yours." And so Rashi makes the point: "Be thine that which is thine." In these words, he admitted his rights to the blessing. He actually said, "This is rightfully yours, the brachot." And so there is some kind of reconciliation happening over there, and it results in Esav putting out the olive branch, and we're going to have to see how at that stage Yaakov reacts to this offer of peace. This is Esav's words: "Nisa v'nelecha." Let's travel on together. Let's be together. And this was Dad's intention, that we be a partnership, that you would bring the spiritual input, and I would have the might and the power and the political input. So let's do this. Let's go together. And to Yaakov's argument that there's a large family, I'll proceed at your pace. I'll accommodate you. This is also a threat that we deal with when we're in exile. What does Yaakov answer? He says, "No. go on ahead of your servants. I'll travel slowly at the pace of my cattle, pace of my children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. Seir is the mountain where Esav is based. It's also called Har Esav, or the mountain of Esav, there in Seir. So he says no. Rashi says, good idea is to always name a destination which is further than where you're really going. The trick they say nowadays is put in your Google Maps, where it lets you put in home. Don't put your home address, because if you're being followed, they're looking there. Then it won't be your home, so they won't know where you live. So similarly, he's not putting his real destination into the ASAP GPS. He is saying, I'm going to go to Seir, but really he only intends going as far as Sukkot, which is actually where he ends up. And he says, if he means to do harm, let him wait to do so until I reach his abode at Seir. Was that a lie? It wasn't. Eventually, we're going to end up in Seir. And there's a verse that we have we say it in the davening at the end of Psukkah de Zimra every morning, just before Yishabach. And that's where we're going to end up. Eventually, we're going to end up in Seir. But when we go to Seir, we conquer Rome definitively and permanently. This is in the days of the Messiah. Obadiah says, "Va'alu Moshihim b'Har Tzion lishpot es Har Esav." Saviors shall go up on Mount Zion to judge the Mount of Esav. So we will get there. We'll get to Seir. But that'll be when Mashiach comes and when Seir is completely under our control. So as I said, historic times and amazing things happening. And the events of the past few days are part of this journey. There is a medrash which kind of obscurish medrash, but the mayor of Beersheba mentioned it on TV only the past couple of days. But when I Googled it a little bit to see the original source, I found references that online already in 2017. And of course, that medrash was written thousands of years ago. Quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who says, how will we know salvation is here? Hear the words. The angel tells Rashbi, this is a sign for you. When you see the Nero of the east in Damascus has fallen, then the kingdom of the east will have fallen, and the redemption in Israel will flourish. The Messiah from the house of David will arrive. Should mention, well, two things. First of all, that the former president, now apparently in hiding, in exile in Russia, actually used to refer to himself as Nero. That was kind of who he thought he was emulating in his dictatorship and despotic behavior. He saw himself as a Nero, so that's kind of pretty interesting. People also took gematries of his name and read into it. I'm not quite sure about that. But I do want to leave you with something absolutely fascinating. Damascus in Hebrew, Damasek. And a few passages ago, we read about Abram conquering Damascus. It says that he went out to war. He was trying to save Lot from the kings who had captured him and taken him, and he went up north, and he went as far as Damasek. So that's the first mention of that city in the Bible, and possibly, according to Ramban's theory, that battle for Damascus foreshadowed the subsequent battles for Damascus. I can remember so clearly in 1973 when the Israelis proceeded very far into Syria, and then 1973, the Rebbe saying, public gatherings, they must take Damascus. And if they take Damascus, we will not have the tsaros that we may end up with. They must just take Damascus. And of course, The Israeli armies didn't follow the Rebbe's advice, and Damascus wasn't taken. It took 51 years for that to materialize. Let me show you the word Damascus. In Hebrew, on the right-hand side in the purple, is the word Damasek, and an anagram for Damasek is Mikdash. Mikdash is a sanctuary. So our sources tell us that when Damasek falls, when Damascus gets rearranged into a Mikdash, a sanctuary, we will then have Damasek falling, and we'll have our sanctuary rising. So it's a long road to Seir, but it looks like we're nearly there. Let's just persevere and see that light appear and shine, and be there to guide us, in this case, forevermore. Thank you.